Can you just give an idea of how this actually came together? I mean, how does something like this happen?
Yeah, you're right, it's absolutely huge, and really it came out of first of all the despair and then the anger from the election result. Obviously the People's Assembly was already in place and growing, and particularly in Manchester we've been going for 2 years, but I think people were so devastated we felt we had to do something when the Tories came to our city. So talking to the National People's Assembly, you know, you could imagine that doing a demonstration would be the obvious thing to do. We've done that before. And obviously the TUC were really keen to build a big demonstration. But then we kind of thought, they're here for a week, we'll be here for a week. So we decided to turn Manchester into an anti-austerity city. And I guess the way we brought that about was going to all our partners and all our friends and all our supporters who are already in the People's Assembly, both nationally and in Manchester, and just saying to them, what would you like to do? What are the things that you think would create, you know, the biggest media coverage and get the most people involved? So it's the key to it has been bringing all those groups together and then coordinating it so that there are no clashes, everybody can get to whatever they want to do. So we facilitated booking lots of venues and kind of getting the groups to talk to each other so that everybody could have really great protests and really great rallies. Manchester's no different from any other major city in the amount of deprivation that we see. We do have a Labour council, and it's a strong kind of Labour area, and we've got Labour MPs. And we've been fighting really to make sure that all the cuts that were being put through that were from the Tories' cuts in budgets, you know, had the least impact possible. But actually some of the decisions have been appalling. And the People's Assembly has helped organise those groups that have been most affected. So particularly in Manchester at the moment is the issue of homelessness, which has more than doubled in the last 12 months. And there are some great Labour councillors who are working with the homeless charities to really try and bring this issue to the fore. But unfortunately, they still are out on the streets, they're still being prosecuted, they're still being threatened with prison. And they are only trying to find a safe collective place where they can live. And everybody who lives and works here has commented on the fact that virtually every doorway in the city centre now has somebody living in it. And that's horrible. But for Manchester, you see, because we're the focus of Tory attention, George Osborne's Northern Powerhouse, you know, and I've heard people call it the Northern Poorhouse, and then this week the Northern Slaughterhouse. You know, we have got that kind of contradiction of the picture the Tories are trying to paint of this upcoming, thriving city, which, you know, it does have that aspect, but we do have this incredible gap between rich and poor, which I guess most cities do have.
Kitchen for people sleeping on the streets. Do you know people who've been involved in that?
Yes. I mean, quite a few people who've been involved in that campaign are part of the People's Assembly. In fact, that's where we lost our first People's Assembly banner, when it was confiscated by the police when it was hanging off one of their tents. So we have tried to stand side by side, but also using all the contacts the People's Assembly have got, both with our local celebrities and trade unionists, to really try and surface the issues. It's not just a question of saying to some of the homeless people, oh, let's just find you a hostel to stay. You know, they need a real kind of plan for life. Somewhere, not just somewhere they can be dumped for a few nights to get them off the streets, and that's what's lacking, and that's what the cutbacks have done, and they're absolutely vicious, and those people are at the front of it. I think the secret to the success in Manchester is we've been very insistent that people leave their party politics at the door, and that we always look for the common ground. We were fortunate to have Mark Steele and Owen Jones get us started, and Mark Steele said, you know, I agree with 99.9% of what you say, but I'm going to have an argument about the 0.1%. And we just don't do that in Manchester. You know, what we argue and discuss about is strategy and tactics about what's the action we should take. And every People's Assembly meeting never finishes without a set of actions at the end of it, because that's what we're for. All our groups that are in it do the kind of a lot of detailed policy work and find out all the information and put across the arguments. What we're here to do is articulate that on the largest, most visible, most interactive, most inclusive scale that we can. And I think this week's been a really good symbol of that. You know, the fact that many groups have owned their own protests and their own meetings and these are not all People's Assembly meetings. the NHS, Save Our NHS, the Devolution campaign, they've organised this. All we've done is provided the venues and made sure they don't clash, and I think that's a great role for the Assembly. Our planning meetings are the most unplanned meeting. How do you have a planning meeting of 100 people? We've been meeting every week since this week of action was called. So inevitably what happens is teams get together with what they're interested in. So if banner making and dropping dummies, as was done this morning, off at the bridge of the M60 is your thing, then you just get on and organise that. We'd like to know it's happening so we can promote it and publicise it, but that is your activity. And what's happened every single week, we've had 20 minutes chat about who's done what, and then people have just gone out and made masks or put up posters or done leafleting or gone back out, most importantly into their communities all over Manchester. People have been doing this fly posting, leafleting meetings. Now, nobody wants to control that. It's just dynamic, isn't it? And that's what builds a big movement. There's been direct actions. Probably there's been loads of stuff we know nothing about, which is brilliant. But what you do have to have is some kind of leadership direction that we decide on collectively that gets big media coverage. I mean, the meeting last night at the cathedral, when I went to visit the bishop with my daughter and John Rees and Ramona McCarthy from the People's Assembly, we were sort of saying to him, what do you think about having the cathedral? Do you think it seats 1,000? Do you think we could pull something off in there? And he was well up for it. He was well up for getting the cathedral involved. And they're having their own meeting tonight, which is Faith Groups Against Austerity, which I'll be speaking at. Now, that's their meeting, they're hosting it, they're doing it, I have no idea who's coming, and that's exactly how you build a movement, isn't it?
It's fantastic. And you mentioned the media coverage, and there has been quite a lot. Maybe we would have liked even more, but some of it has kind of zoomed in on very tiny things like the egg chucking incident, or whatever you think of that. I mean, what have you thought of the media coverage, and how do you think we can improve on how we relate to the media, or even making our own, as we're trying to do now?
The mainstream media, to be honest, was quite positive in the run-up.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of national publicity, and locally here, the Manchester Evening News has been carrying spreads. They did a full guide on our timetable, reprinted our press releases. So I think they did a job of telling the people of Manchester what was going on if they wanted to be involved in it. I think once the Tories got here, something absolutely changed, and that's why they've zoomed in on the eggs, is because they've got to find the one thing that takes it away from the rest of the publicity, and I think that's a sign of our strength, actually, that that's all they could find. And because when a movement gets so big, if one egg gets thrown at a Tory, I know when I go into work, everybody will either have been on a demonstration, been to one of our meetings, or know somebody else who has, and that's how you kind of kill that kind of disproportionate media, I think. But our own media is really important, and I noticed that some of the films that have been going up in the last few days have been getting tens of thousands of views. I mean, this is going absolutely massive, and they know this. And we've got video footage so people know the true stories, don't they? And that's how you win it, really, I think. We need more of it. Before Christmas, the People's Assembly hosted the first meeting about the Tories' plans for devolution, and what we did there was we got every single campaign, the Trades Council, unions, everybody we knew who was interested in what the Tories' plans were about devolution together, and the campaign for a referendum on devolution was launched, and that campaign's been running. The People's Assembly's been a strong part of it. We didn't know then that Osborne had a plan to devolve the health budget. I mean, we have a national health service, and Manchester and the Greater Manchester area, we're the first area that gets given a pot of the national money. It's not new money, but we're given a pot of the national money to spend how they think fit. And this is being sold to us as some kind of democracy because it places it in our hands. And the problem with it is it's not in our hands, it's in the leaders of the council's hands. And we don't elect anybody who goes onto those committees. The leaders of the councils aren't elected by the people, they're elected by the councillors, the people who are already in the local councils. So that pot of money has just been moved across with all sorts of strings attached, and I'm sure other people will talk in more detail about how that health money has to be spent. And our friends in the Save Our National Health Service campaigns are briefing us on the fact that this is going to be an absolute disaster for the health service in the area. My feeling has been this week, and in the run-up to this week, I have never experienced so many people not only wanting to get involved but being really active. I mean, I talked to you about the organising, come to a planning meeting. It doesn't sound that exciting, does it? Come to a briefing, and we've had 50 and 100 people at these meetings. And I think that doesn't go away. I think at our People's Assembly meeting on October the 13th, here in the Central Hall, I think that will be big. People will want to be part of Manchester People's Assembly. They've been into the city. I think people are going back to their cities and towns, will want to either build assemblies or join in the ones that they were in. At the CWU meeting last night, loads of people were signing up to be part of the People's Assembly. That sort of thing doesn't go away. The next steps have to be some real rooted campaigns in the communities combined with some big visible events. And in Manchester, we'll be thinking about some big visible events we can put on in the city, as well as joining in with the National Housing Demonstration when that perhaps takes place later, whenever that is. But we do need to keep the pressure up, and of course we will be campaigning around the Trident issue in February.